Minh Thúy xin kính chào quý vị hôm nay thứ Sáu, 12 tháng 7, 2024. Đến với VATV hôm nay gồm có phỏng vấn đặc biệt và nhạc lá bồ đề. Kính thưa quý vị, nếu nhìn vào biến động ở miền Nam trong những năm đầu thập niên năm 1960, những quyết định quân sự sai lầm ở miền Trung, cuộc đảo chính năm 1963 và những hoạt động ngày càng mạnh mẽ của Cộng sản ở nông thôn. Như Frank Scotton đã trình bày trong các kỳ trước, cơ hội dân chủ có thể có ở miền Nam Việt Nam hay không? Khi so sánh ở miền Nam, ngoài mặt, Bắc Việt có vẻ đoàn kết hơn. Ở Bắc Việt không có biểu tình. Các nhân viên cao cấp quân đội Bắc Việt có vẻ quyết định đồng nhất. Các hoạt động của Cộng sản ở nông thôn miền Nam Việt Nam ngày càng bạo dạn hơn. Phải chăng điều này có nghĩa rằng mầm hạt dân chủ ở miền Nam Việt Nam đã chết kể ngay từ những giây phút đầu tiên? Ông Frank Scotton, nhân viên phòng thông tin Hoa Kỳ, không nghĩ vậy. Ngoài những tiếp xúc với dân chúng ở miền quê, ông cũng theo dõi những hoạt động dân chủ ở miền Nam Việt Nam và nhìn thấy những bước tiến dân chủ thực tiễn như Hội đồng lập hiến, Hội đồng cố vấn tỉnh. Frank Scotton cho rằng tiến trình dân chủ ở miền Nam không hề khác với những tiến trình dân chủ ở các quốc gia khác như Đại Hàn, Đài Loan. Theo quan niệm cá nhân của ông Frank Scotton cũng nêu ra những ưu nhược điểm của việc bầu cử hội đồng tỉnh. Cụ thể hơn, ông nêu ra những ưu điểm của vấn đề cần có, những khác biệt ý kiến như trưởng phòng CIA William Colby trình bày. Minh Thúy mời quý vị theo dõi phần 7 phỏng vấn đặc biệt lần này qua suy nghĩ của ông Frank Scotton về Việt Nam trong những năm đầu thập niên năm 1960 do Phan Lê Dũng, Võ Thành Nhân và Minh Thúy thực hiện.
But it seems like the North has already politically evolved faster than in the South, at least, because there seems to be, you're talking about the unity between the different organizations in the North, and they seem to bind together. They have a political strain that's really clearly more obvious than we do in the South, because most people would argue, like, what would be the competing version of the communist view from the North, and we don't have.
That needed to evolve, but I thought there was a possibility. I wouldn't go far as to say probability, but there was a possibility that could evolve if the military circumstances in the rural areas could stabilize a bit. And there were kind of some, I would say, like in hydraulics, there were some eddies of encouragement. I thought that the Constituent Assembly to draw up a constitution was a positive step, not one that I was very much involved with, but just as an observer and a reader of things, and occasionally conversing with someone like Dang Ban Sung when I would be down in Saigon, friends introducing me to them.
But don't you think that's still in the city, and it seems to be like among the elite? I'm talking here at the local and the peasants.
But there was some, in the Constituent Assembly, there was some serious conversation about having elected, not just elected advisory province councils, but elected province assemblies and elected province chiefs. Now the South Vietnam military vetoed that, so that when you got the Constituent Assembly had recommended it, but it was vetoed by the military council, and so when the Constitution was adopted, it did not provide for elected province chiefs. Now my thinking, and I apologize if anybody watching thinks that I'm being unnecessarily derogatory, but I think that those who commanded the Vietnamese military at the time felt that elected province chiefs, elected province governments would vitiate the chain of corruption that was already well established at that time, whereby corps commanders pretty much determined who would be province chiefs. And some provinces were relatively lucrative. Let's say you look at my old province of Bindin, for example, building the Phuket Air Base, the Queen Yan Harbor, the movement of supplies on Highway 19 to the Highlands, the supplies for the Korean division, transportation. There was a lot of.
So you think the Avin is doing this for their own benefit rather than the country's benefit, is what you're seeing?
Well, I thought that the country would definitely benefit by having elected province governments, and some friends of mine in the Vietnamese military agreed. One of my friends again, Thuy, who by that time was a lieutenant colonel, he said, "Well, not all those elected to be province chiefs will be competent, but then not all battalion commanders are competent."
Yes.
So the level of competence in every field has to be raised.
And also the question of whether to having the elected official at the local. I think a couple of people from the Avin told me that it's also they are thinking about communist infiltration, and you could possibly have a communist being elected as one of the officers. Is what they are again? Is that just an excuse, or is that something that could happen?
It may not be simply an excuse. It may have been a fear organizationally that would happen, but I would say it would just be one of those things that you had to risk for the principle. The principal difference between us and the communists was that we believed that people choose their leadership. The communists believed that they, at least temporarily, had to impose leadership because they knew better than anybody else what had to be done. See?
I see.
So it was a choice that we could have made, but we didn't. Now I know that if you'll excuse me for jumping ahead a decade or so, but I know that you're going to speak with my friend, my brother Frank Snepp. So let me mention something about Frank. I didn't have a lot of respect for a lot of American officers there, but I developed tremendous respect for Frank very quickly, and here's how it happened. I worked for a time for Bill Colby when he was running the rural development program in MacV with the rank of ambassador, and he had pulled me in, and a remarkable person in many respects, and said that he wanted me to be his special assistant for field problems. And I initially said that I didn't want to do that because, first of all, there were a lot of things that we did that I didn't agree with. His response to that was, "If you and I would agree on everything, I wouldn't need you." Okay, and then I told him, still trying to weasel out of it, I said, well, also, I'm not a very good office person. I'm not comfortable in an office environment. And he said, "If I were to see you in the office every day, I would be disappointed."
Okay.
It's a hell of a thing.
So the thing that in your mind and in his mind are completely different.
Yeah.
What he's having in for you and what you thinking you were doing were
Yeah.
at
So I
odds.
wound up being his special assistant. Now, there was a time in '71 where he went back to Washington, D.C. on consultations and to see his family and a couple of other things. And while he was there, Congressman Pete McCloskey, a Korean War decorated veteran, saw him and said that he was going to come out to make a kind of eyeball visit on Vietnam, and he wanted to see it as it was, not as people wanted him to see it. Mm. So Colby sent what we call a back channel message to Saigon and said he wanted me to be the escort for McCloskey. Much later, when I expressed some surprise when he was back in Saigon, he said, well, I knew you wouldn't let anybody lie to him, you know, that you would be tough when you had to and you wouldn't let it happen. And I remember him saying, in our system of government, the worst thing you can do is lie to an elected representative of the people. Doesn't make any difference what you think about that person. It's the principle. So I accompanied McCloskey. Once someone was going to lie to him in Da Nang, I interrupted, didn't allow that to happen. In Quang Ngai province, McCloskey wanted to go to the site where an American unit had murdered more than 500 Vietnamese hamlet dwellers.
You're talking about My Lai, or is that a different?
Well, it's in Tu Kung hamlet. Mm-hmm. If you looked at the old maps that the military used, that hamlet is shown as My Lai 4, because they never got the names of hamlets right, I would say, but it's actually Tu Kung hamlet. So at the 23rd Division headquarters, he was told by the deputy division commander that it wasn't possible to bring him there because it was insecure. So I waited politely until the coffee break and then pulled the assistant division commander and said, you know, that doesn't wash. You know, we're going to go there. And if you don't arrange it, I'm going to arrange it through the district chief. So he capitulated, and we went there, and with me interpreting, he saw the ditch where more than 100 bodies were extracted. We walked through the hamlet. It was like an Old West ghost town, empty houses. In other hamlets around there, people were returning. People were in the fields working, not in that one. So Pete McCloskey was shaken by the experience, but he digested it. Anyway, and we formed a friendship. Pete McCloskey is still alive. Here in California, we last spoke about 3 or 4 months ago on the phone. Well, in 75, I already knew Frank Snepp. We'd been in a couple of meetings together, and I knew he was a sharp-minded, perceptive officer with important responsibilities. The Assistant Secretary of State, Phil Habib, was bringing a congressional delegation late March, early April, 75, critical time, to Vietnam. And Pete McCloskey was one of the members of Congress who was going to be included, and he told Phil Habib that he wanted me in the group too.
Minh Thúy xin kính chào quý vị hôm nay thứ Sáu, 19 tháng 7, 2024. Đến với VATV hôm nay gồm có phỏng vấn đặc biệt và nhạc lá bồ đề. Kính thưa quý vị, nếu nhìn vào vấn đề thâu thập và báo cáo tin tức, sự phức tạp của việc thâu thập tin tức không chỉ đơn thuần ở vấn đề các dữ kiện ngược chiều. Ngoài những khác biệt bên trong cách thu thập dữ kiện về nơi chốn, nhân sự, thời gian, không những cách các quan sát viên nhìn vào các dữ kiện mà cách họ tường trình hoặc là viết báo cáo về những điều chứng kiến cũng khác nhau. Các báo cáo của các cơ quan quân sự thường phải viết theo một thể thức nhất định, sao cho bản báo cáo nào cũng cùng một thể thức như đã được quy định. Trong khi đó thì các bản báo cáo của những nhân viên dân sự thì lại khác hẳn. Các báo cáo của các nhân viên dân sự thường nhấn mạnh với tính cách chủ quan của quan sát viên và thường có thể thức tự do, vượt trên vấn đề thể thức. Ở những thời điểm có tính cách quyết định nhất, vẫn có những vấn đề tranh chấp bên trong các bộ và đơn thuần chỉ vì lợi ích chung của bộ thay vì lợi ích chung cho toàn thể cuộc chiến. Trong suốt cuộc chiến, mỗi khi cần tìm hiểu sâu về tình hình Việt Nam, thì Quốc hội Mỹ thường gửi các ủy ban của Quốc hội sang Việt Nam để trực tiếp tìm hiểu tình hình. Một khi sang Việt Nam thì các thành viên của Ủy ban tìm hiểu thường được quyền tự do tiếp xúc hoặc là yêu cầu được thuyết trình về những vấn đề đang được tìm hiểu. Đây chính là điểm xoáy mà các cơ quan Hoa Kỳ ở Việt Nam vận động tối đa để lôi cuốn Quốc hội Hoa Kỳ về phe của họ. Những vận động bên trong của Bộ Ngoại giao Hoa Kỳ thường khiến cho Quốc hội không nhìn rõ được và đôi khi nhìn sai lệch hẳn vấn đề. Để tìm hiểu ảnh hưởng sâu rộng của những tin tức được tường trình, mời quý vị theo dõi buổi thuyết trình quan trọng bên trong Bộ Ngoại giao Hoa Kỳ ở Việt Nam. Trong buổi tường trình này, thì Tòa đại sứ Mỹ ở Việt Nam đã cố tình che mắt Quốc hội Mỹ, cố tình giấu giếm những tin tức tình báo có thể gây ảnh hưởng sâu xa đối với quyết định của Hoa Thịnh Đốn về Việt Nam. Minh Thúy mời quý vị theo dõi câu chuyện qua lời kể của ông Frank Scotton, nhân viên cao cấp của Sở Ngoại vụ, trong phần 8 phỏng vấn đặc biệt do Phan Lê Dũng, Võ Thành Nhân và Minh Thúy thực hiện.
So I went back there. Well, the opening embassy briefing for the congressman within the group was, most politely I could put it, was deceptive. Was not forthcoming, and not even just that, but I thought misrepresented the situation in their eagerness to try to wrangle congressional approval for more funding, but it was dishonest. And Frank was not in the group. He was not in the panel of embassy officers, but should have been, given his responsibilities. Should have been. I was surprised he was not there, and I didn't have a lot of respect for the deputy ambassador, the head of the political section. Oh, just awful. So being not quite as cranky as I was when I was a young man, but still feeling disturbed. When I was back with the delegation in the housing that had been provided, Pete McCloskey came over and he said, "What did you think of that briefing?" I said, "It was urinarily poor." Speaking in rougher language than that. And he said, "Well, what can I do? How can we get the facts?" And so I said, "Okay, are you going to see Polgar, Tom Polgar at all?" Polgar was the senior CIA officer there. Also, a guy who I didn't have much respect for, much less affection, having dealt with him a couple of times before. And he said, "Yes, I will be." And I said, "Okay, when you see Tom Polgar, flatter him, but say that you understand that a very knowledgeable, involved officer in his staff is Frank Scotton, and you'd like to have an opportunity to speak with him. And flatter Polgar." Yeah. So Pete McCloskey was able to be educated by our friend Frank Scotton. The next morning, as I was sitting at a breakfast table having coffee and donuts with Bella Abzug and Mildred, I forget her name, a Congress lady from New Jersey, and another congressman, I think the head of the delegation from Georgia, Pete McCloskey came up to me and grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "Thanks for that referral. That was really great. Boy, it was so much better than the embassy briefing. And you're right, your friend, he really understands what's going on and what a difference it's made." And then he pumped my shoulder again and he walked away. Immediately then, the other congressional people said, "Oh, we want to talk to the same person. We want to talk to the same person." See? Shit. Well, excuse me. I called Frank on the phone and explained the situation to him, and I said, "Look, I understand it's difficult for you, but these people really want to talk to you. 999 out of 1,000 Foreign Service, CIA, young Army officers would have said, "Oh shit, I can't do it." Frank said, "I'll do it." You know, following the Bill Colby dictum that you can never lie to an elected representative of the American people. And, you know, Frank, you know, walked the gangplank, the tightrope, and he met with those congressional people, and he told it the way it was, the situation. I already had a great deal of affectionate regard for him, but that has anchored my commitment to him as a person and a great guy over the following decades.
Well, back to the 1963, after President Diem fell,
Yeah.
did you see a lot of change compared to in Vietnam compared to the time before? You got in 1962, so 1963 would have been 1 year after
Well,
that.
it's hard to say because, for instance, in Long An, where I went down and conducted that survey of hamlets and to do a report on what had actually happened there, the newly appointed province chief was Lê Minh Dao.
Oh,
And it was the first time I met Lê Minh Dao. Subsequently, I got to know him better, but he was dynamic. He was concerned. He was responsive, and I remember leaving and going back up to Dalat en route to other points further north, and seeing Kim Vui, with whom I was in love at the time, and am now still, and telling her, you know, if this is the kind of change we will get in terms of military leadership, then we might have a workable situation. Well, Lê Minh Dao, it turned out, first of all, I think was only there for about 3 or 4 months before there was another change. And every time there was a change at the national level, then you'd get these downstream changes in corps and province. So he was removed as Long An province chief, but you know, I thought that there was just too much jockey playing and jockeys jumping from horseback to horseback during that period of late 63, 64, 65. You know, so many of them looking for their own personal advantage, and then you wind up with some that I thought marginal or incompetent, like General Vinh Lop, who was made Two Corps commander for a time. You know, I mean, Vietnamese as he was, he knew less about the area in Two Corps than I did. And his interest in Binh Dinh province seemed to be appointing a nephew of his wife as province chief in Binh Dinh so that they could derive some lucrative income from things like the Phu Quoc Air Base construction, things like that.
Okay. So the change is it's still chaotic. It's not stable enough for you to do an evaluation whether that's a better or worse time.
Well, except in some cases like Lê Minh Dao, I could see right away. I said, you know, there's some real hope here, expectation of positive change, but there was a lack of consistency during that period, I thought.
Would you say in that period it was chaotic enough for the American to come in, or you still think that it's possible for the Vietnamese to go it alone with the aid of the American?
Well, at 64 it might have been, but you know, once you had 65 was a bit of a change. You had the battles at Ba Gia in Quang Ngai, where a district town was lost, but also a substantial ARVN defeat. The Battle of Bin Gia in Military Region 3. Sometimes the two are confused by foreign writers, but they're two quite different battles, but they were both losses for the
Vietnamese
for the
side,
Republic of
yes,
government of Vietnam. I think of there having been two RVNs, the first republic,
And the
then
second.
a GVN,
Yes.
and then another RVN.